Maya's hands moved mechanically, wiping down the same table for the third time as the afternoon sun slanted through the greasy windows of Mel's diner. The familiar rhythm of plates clinking and coffee brewing had become her soundtrack for the past 5 years, a predictable symphony that kept her anchored to this small-town life she'd never planned to live. At 32, she carried herself with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned to make the best of disappointment. Her auburn hair was always pulled back in a neat ponytail, and her smile, though genuine, had grown tired around the edges. The dreams of journalism school and city newsrooms had faded into sepia-toned memories, filed away like old photographs in a drawer she rarely opened. The bell above the door chimed, and Maya looked up from her perpetual cleaning. Time seemed to crystallize, the ambient noise of the diner fading to a distant hum. There, silhouetted against the afternoon light, stood David Chun, the man who had once promised her the world and then disappeared with it. He looked older, more refined. His dark hair was shorter now, styled with the precision of success. The worn band t-shirts had been replaced by a crisp button-down and expensive jeans. But his eyes, those deep brown eyes that had once made her feel like she was the only person in any room, remained unchanged. Maya, his voice carried the same gentle timbre that had once whispered poetry in her dorm room. Her coffee pot trembled in her grip. "Table 7 is open," she managed, her voice steadier than her hands. David didn't move toward the booth. Instead, he approached the counter where she stood frozen, a deer in the headlights of her own past. "I heard you were still here. I was hoping we could talk." The diner suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in with the weight of 13 years and all the words they'd never said. Maya could feel the curious stares of her regular customers. Mrs. Henderson with her Tuesday tuna melt, Joey from the hardware store nursing his third cup of coffee. This was her world now. These people who knew her as the reliable waitress with the quick wit and the sad smile. They didn't know about the girl who'd once written poetry at 2 a.m. or the woman who'd waited by her phone for 3 months after graduation, believing in promises that turned out to be as substantial as morning mist. "There's nothing to talk about," she said, but even as the words left her mouth, she felt their inadequacy. There was everything to talk about. The job in Seattle he'd taken without telling her, the engagement announcement she'd seen on Facebook 2 years later, the life she'd rebuilt from the ashes of their shared dreams. David's expression softened. "Maya, please. I know I hurt you. I know I was a coward. But I'm here now and You're here now?" The words came out sharper than she intended, drawing more attention from the other patrons. She lowered her voice. "It's been 13 years, David. 13 years of silence. And now you just walk in here like I never stopped thinking about you," he finished quietly. The coffee pot slipped from her fingers, shattering against the linoleum floor in an explosion of glass and dark liquid. The sound seemed to break whatever spell had held the diner in suspended animation. Conversations resumed, chairs scraped, life moved forward. But Maya remained frozen, staring at the mess at her feet, a perfect metaphor for what David's return had already begun to do to the carefully constructed life she'd built in his absence. 3 days had passed since David's appearance at the diner, and Maya found herself jumping at every sound, her nerves strung tight as violin strings. She'd managed to avoid him since Tuesday, taking different routes home, switching shifts with Jenny, even grocery shopping at the overpriced market across town instead of her usual spot. But Millbrook was too small for such elaborate evasions to last long. The knock on her apartment door came at 7 p.m. on Friday, soft but persistent. She knew it was him before she looked through the peephole. Something about the tentative rhythm of it, respectful but determined, so quintessentially David. "I'm not going away, Maya," his voice carried through the thin door. "We need to talk." Her apartment, with its second-hand furniture and collection of unread novels, suddenly felt shabby under the weight of his presence just outside. She thought of the last time he'd been in her space, their shared dorm room, textbooks scattered across her bed, his laptop open to a story he was writing for the campus paper. They'd been planning their future then, mapping out a life together with the confidence of 20-somethings who believed love could conquer geography and career ambitions. Maya opened the door, but didn't invite him in. "What do you want, David?" He looked tired, older than he had in the diner's harsh fluorescent lighting. "To explain. To apologize. To tell you about Sarah. Your wife. The words tasted bitter. Ex-wife. The divorce was finalized 6 months ago. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she remembered from their college days when he was nervous or excited. Maya, I never forgot about us. About you. But you forgot how to pick up a phone, how to write an email, how to keep a promise. She gripped the doorframe, using it to anchor herself against the tide of old emotions threatening to pull her under. Do you know what it was like? Waiting for you to call, to explain why you just disappeared? I called your parents, David. Your mother hung up on me. David's face crumpled. I was 22 and terrified. The job in Seattle was everything I thought I wanted, and I convinced myself you'd hold me back. That we'd both be better off if I made a clean break. A clean break. Maya laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is that what you called it? I called it cowardice. You're right. It was. He stepped closer, and she caught a familiar scent. The same cologne he'd worn in college, mixed with something new, something expensive. I spent 13 years trying to prove I'd made the right choice. I married Sarah because she was safe, predictable. I climbed every ladder I thought mattered. And I was miserable. Maya felt something inside her chest crack, like ice beginning to thaw. So you came back to what? Find your old life? Recapture your youth? I'm not a museum exhibit, David. That's not. He stopped, took a breath. When my marriage fell apart, I realized I'd been running from the only real thing I'd ever had. I came back because I needed to know if there was still a chance for us. The words hung between them like a bridge she wasn't sure she wanted to cross. Through her neighbor's thin walls, she could hear the evening news, the sounds of ordinary life continuing while hers threatened to implode again. I have a good life here, she said. But even as she spoke, she wondered if that was true. Good, maybe. Safe, certainly. But was it the life she'd really wanted? I know. I can see that. But Maya, don't you ever wonder what might have been? What might still be? She did wonder. God help her, she did. Every time she served coffee to couples planning their futures, every time she watched romantic comedies alone in her apartment, every time she woke up to an empty bed and wondered if this was all there was. I need time, she whispered. David nodded, hope flickering in his eyes like a candle flame in wind. I'm staying at the Millbrook Inn, room 203. I'm not leaving again without an answer, Maya. One way or another. As she closed the door behind him, Maya caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. For the first time in years, she looked uncertain, vulnerable, alive with possibility and terrified by it in equal measure. Maya couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, watching shadows from passing cars dance across the plaster like memories she couldn't quite grasp. At 2 a.m., she gave up and padded to the kitchen, making tea she didn't want and sitting at her small table surrounded by the detritus of a life half-lived. The photographs were what undid her, a shoebox she'd pulled from the closet in a moment of masochistic curiosity. There they were, 20-year-old Maya and David, arms wrapped around each other at homecoming, faces bright with the kind of joy that comes from believing the whole world is spread out before you like a feast. In another, they were studying together in the library, her head on his shoulder, his hand tangled in her hair. They looked so certain, so completely convinced that love was enough to overcome anything. The knock at her door at 2:30 a.m. didn't surprise her. Some part of her had been expecting it, as if the intensity of her thoughts had summoned him. I couldn't sleep either, David said when she opened the door. This time, she let him in. He looked around her apartment, really looked, taking in the carefully arranged books, the small easel in the corner with a half-finished watercolor, the framed certificate from her online journalism course. You kept writing, he said, picking up a notebook from her coffee table. Local newspaper pieces, mostly. Nothing important. She moved to take the notebook from him, but he held it gently, reverently. Maya, these are beautiful. This piece about the diner closing down last year. It's everything I remembered about your writing. Maybe better. She felt heat rise in her cheeks. It didn't save the place, but it honored it. That matters. They sat on opposite ends of her small couch, the photo box between them like a bridge across 13 years of separation. David picked up the homecoming photo, his thumb tracing the edge. I need to tell you about the last 13 years, he said quietly. All of it. The successes that felt hollow, the marriage that was comfortable but not real, the way I kept measuring every moment against what I remembered about us. Maya pulled her knees to her chest. And I need to tell you about the men I tried to love who weren't you. About the job applications I never sent because I was afraid of failing. About how I convinced myself that staying here was noble when really, I was just scared. They talked until dawn, filling in the years between them with honesty that felt both painful and necessary. David told her about the panic attacks that started in his third year of marriage, the way he'd drive past airports and imagine boarding planes to anywhere she might be. Maya admitted to the nights she'd composed emails she never sent, the way she'd kept his number in her phone for 5 years before finally deleting it. As the sun crested the horizon, painting her apartment in shades of gold and possibility, Maya felt something shift inside her chest. The careful walls she'd built around her heart didn't crumble all at once. They simply became permeable, letting in light she'd forgotten existed. "I can't promise this will work," she said, her voice hoarse from hours of talking. "I can't promise I won't resent the lost years, or that I'll be able to trust you completely right away." David nodded, his eyes never leaving her face. "I can't promise I won't make mistakes, but I can promise I'll never leave without a word again. And I can promise that if you give us another chance, I'll spend every day trying to deserve it." Maya looked out her window at the town that had been her sanctuary and her prison, at the life she'd built from the pieces of broken dreams. It was a good life, safe and predictable. But for the first time in 13 years, she felt the pull of something more, the terrifying, exhilarating possibility of becoming who she was meant to be instead of who she'd settled for being. "Room 203, she said finally. David's smile was radiant, transforming his face back into the boy she'd fallen in love with at 19. "Room 203. Maya stood, her legs unsteady with exhaustion and possibility. "Give me an hour to pack." As David left, Maya looked around her apartment one more time. Tomorrow, she would give her notice at the diner. Next week, they would drive to the city together, and she would finally submit those job applications that had been gathering digital dust on her laptop. She would risk everything again, her heart, her carefully constructed safety, her fear of failure. But tonight, for the first time in 13 years, Maya fell asleep dreaming of the future instead of mourning the past. And in her dreams, she was finally, impossibly, completely alive. If you liked it, subscribe to the channel and enjoy these other amazing stories.